Alice, let's get a divorce." The man's icy voice pierced Alice's heart. In her hand, she still clutched the prenatal exam report labeled twins. 3 years into their marriage, she poured her heart and soul into him, spent every last penny of her family's fortune, and even donated bone marrow to his mother, all while wearing her body down. Yet today, on the day she entered her 3rd month of pregnancy, he brought home his first love, Ida. Ida stroked her belly, leaning weakly against his chest. "Sister, I'm sorry. I'm carrying Colin's child." Alice watched the adulterous pair and smiled. She tucked away the pregnancy test results, calmly signed the divorce papers, dragged her suitcase, and turned to leave. Colin sneered, certain she'd come crawling back to him in tears sooner or later. Yet the next day, global financial headlines screamed, "Alice, the world's richest man's daughter and sole heir to a trillion-dollar empire who vanished 3 years ago, makes a high-profile return." She placed her hand on her slightly rounded belly and announced to the world, "I am pregnant and will soon marry Beck." Colin went mad. Crash, the expensive antique vase smashed violently onto the floor, shattering into pieces. Colin's eyes blazed crimson as he stared fixedly at the familiar yet unfamiliar face on the television screen. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. That timid housewife Alice, who never dared speak up in his presence, how could she possibly be the long-lost daughter of the world's richest man, Chad? "Colin, don't get angry." Ida turned pale with fear, carefully grabbing his arm. Smack. Colin lashed out with a backhand, slapping her hard across the face. "You bitch. Didn't you say she was just an orphan with no parents?" he roared, like a caged beast enraged. Ida was struck so hard that blood trickled from the corner of her mouth. Covering her face, tears instantly streamed down her cheeks. I don't know either. Colin, she's always said that." How could she know? She'd always thought Alice was a pushover, someone she could manipulate at will. That's why 3 years ago, she schemed to marry Alice off to Colin, then just a penniless young man, so Alice could suffer in her place. Meanwhile, she herself took the money Alice gave her and went abroad to live it up. Who would have thought this soft target was actually a prehistoric crocodile in sheep's clothing? "Get out." Colin kicked her away, grabbed his car keys, and stormed out. He had to get answers. He would confront Alice himself and demand to know what the hell was going on. How dare she deceive him? Meanwhile, at the Shin family manor, Alice was lounging lazily on the sofa, savoring the special pregnancy meal prepared by her top-tier nutritionist. "Miss, Colin is outside, insisting on seeing you," the butler reported respectfully. "Oh?" Alice scooped up a spoonful of bird's nest without even lifting her eyelids. "Tell him to wait." "Yes." Outside the estate, a torrential downpour raged. Colin, without an umbrella, stood rigidly outside the iron gate, letting the icy rain drench him completely. He kept ringing the doorbell, shouting hoarsely, "Alice! Come out here! You liar! Explain yourself!" No one answered. He stood there from noon until nightfall. The rain grew heavier, his body grew colder, and his heart grew more and more frantic. Everything he prided himself on became a laughingstock in the face of Alice's status as a billionaire heiress. His so-called handouts and compensation were likely seen as nothing more than pocket money. What he couldn't accept most was, on TV, the man beside Alice, Beck. Alice was actually going to marry him? Have children for him? Why the hell should she? That woman was clearly his. "Alice!" He pounded on the iron gate like a madman, his palms bleeding from the force. "Is the child inside you mine?" He finally voiced the question that had terrified him all day. That prenatal exam form. Though it was blurred out in the news report, he could see it clearly. The date of the examination was the day before their divorce. 3 months pregnant. Twins. The timing matched perfectly. That night, drunk, he mistook a woman for Ida. Could it be that the woman that night wasn't Ida at all, but Alice? Once the thought took root, it spread like wildfire. His heart felt as though an invisible hand had clenched it tightly, the pain so intense it left him breathless. Just then, the iron gates of the estate slowly swung open. Emerging was not Alice, but a man in a black suit, holding a black umbrella, his presence so overwhelming it felt suffocating. Beck. He looked down on the disheveled Colin with eyes devoid of warmth, as if observing an insignificant insect. "Colin, what is it?" His voice was deep and magnetic, yet carried a bone-chilling coldness. Overwhelmed by his imposing presence, Colin froze, momentarily unable to respond. Beck's patience was clearly wearing thin. He glanced at his wristwatch. "I'll give you 10 seconds. Only then did Colin snap out of it. Pointing toward the villa, he hissed, "Where's Alice? Make her come out to see me. The child she's carrying is mine." "Yours?" Beck's thin lips curled into a mocking smile, as if he'd heard the biggest joke in the world. "Colin, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't just say whatever you want. What my wife is carrying in her womb is my seed. I can tell you that with absolute certainty." "Your wife?" Colin's eyes instantly reddened. "You two aren't even married." "Oh, I forgot to tell you." Beck slowly pulled 2 red certificates from his coat pocket and waved them in front of him. "We got married yesterday." Marriage certificate. Those 3 blinding words stabbed like 3 sharp knives, piercing Colin's eyes. They had actually gotten married? No, impossible. He staggered backward, his face ashen. "Colin." Beck tucked away the marriage certificate, his gaze turning icy. "I don't care what history you and my wife share. But from this moment on, she is Beck's wife and the mother of my child. You'd better stay away from her. Or else." He didn't finish his sentence, but the warning in his eyes was more terrifying than any threat. "As for that child you mentioned." Beck paused, as if recalling something, and let out a soft chuckle. "I do recall now. My wife married you because, on his deathbed, her grandfather instructed her to repay a benefactor. Back then, that benefactor saved her grandfather's life on the condition that he would ensure 3 generations of prosperity for the family. My wife is kind-hearted. She thought giving money was too vulgar, so she decided to marry you herself. Supporting you for 3 years was her way of repaying the debt. Now that the 3 years are up, the debt is repaid. So, Colin, stop humiliating yourself." This so-called 3-year marriage was nothing more than a task she completed. Bam! Every word Beck uttered struck Colin like a thunderbolt, crashing down on his skull. Gratitude? Duty? The love and support he thought they shared? To her, it was nothing but a transaction? He believed he controlled everything, yet in the end, he was the clown being played like a puppet in her hands? A mouthful of blood spurted from Colin's lips. He fell stiffly into the cold rain. When Colin awoke, he was already in the hospital. Ida sat by his bedside, her eyes swollen from crying. "Colin, you're finally awake. You scared the life out of me." Seeing her face, Colin felt nothing but nausea. If not for this woman, he would never have divorced Alice. If not for her, he would now be the son-in-law of the Shin family, the father of those 2 unborn children. "Get out." He shoved her away and propped himself up with his weakened body. "I told you to get out. Didn't you hear me?" Ida was terrified by the hatred in his eyes and scrambled out of the hospital room. Colin was left alone in the room. He picked up his phone, his hands trembling as he dialed the number he knew by heart. The phone rang for a long time before someone finally answered. It wasn't Alice. It was Beck. "Colin, calling my wife this late is a bit inappropriate, don't you think?" Beck's voice carried a hint of lazy possessiveness. "Get her on the phone," Colin bellowed. "She's in the shower," Beck replied in a hushed voice, tinged with suggestive hoarseness. "Not convenient." "You." Colin trembled with rage, picturing the suggestive scene unfolding on the other end of the line. The woman who should have been his was now with another man. "Colin." Beck's voice suddenly turned cold. "I warned you to stay away from her. Beep, beep. The call was abruptly cut off. Colin threw his phone to the ground in a fit of rage. Ah! He let out a desperate howl like a wounded beast. Meanwhile, at the Shin family estate, Alice had just stepped out of the bathroom when she spotted Beck holding her phone, his expression sour. "Whose call is it?" she asked casually, drying her hair. "A madman." Beck set down his phone, walked over, and naturally took the towel from her hands, gently wiping her dripping wet hair. His movements were light and tender. "Baby, standing for so long must be tiring. Sit down." He guided her onto the sofa, kneeling halfway before her as he continued drying her hair. Alice felt a bit uneasy. "I can do it myself. Don't move." Beck's voice brooked no argument. "The doctor said you need to rest properly now." Alice had no choice but to sit still and let him take care of her. The relationship between them was complicated. Beck was the fiancé her grandfather had chosen for her. 3 years ago, to escape this arranged marriage and fulfill her grandfather's dying wish to repay a debt of gratitude, she ran away from home, changed her identity, and married Colin. Little did she know that 3 years later, divorced and raising 2 children, she would still end up in this man's clutches. Beck, she gazed at his flawlessly handsome profile and couldn't help asking, "Are we really going to get married? What else?" Beck lifted his eyes to meet hers. "Do you want my child to be born without a father?" "But..." "No buts." Beck cut her off, his large hand resting on her still flat stomach. "As for you, Alice, the moment you ran from our wedding 3 years ago, it was sealed. For the rest of your life, you will be mine." His words were domineering and forceful, yet tinged with a self-assured tenderness. Alice's heart skipped a beat uncontrollably. Perhaps, marrying him wasn't such a bad choice after all. At the very least, he was 10,000 times better than Colin. Over the next few days, Colin went mad, trying every possible means to see Alice. But he couldn't even get past the front gate. His company's stock began a precipitous decline after he crossed Beck. Formerly sycophantic partners severed ties one after another. Banks started demanding loan repayments. Within days, he transformed from a highly successful CEO of a publicly traded company into a bankrupt, disgraced individual. The very person responsible for all this, Ida, vanished at that moment, taking with her the last bit of liquidity from his company's accounts. Colin was utterly devastated. He finally understood what he had truly lost. He lost the woman who loved him more than life itself, lost his 2 children, and lost everything he had ever been proud of. That night, he drank himself into a stupor and stumbled to the place he and Alice had once called home. That villa, he gave it to Ida. He stumbled inside, only to discover a forgotten box in the bedroom. Inside were Alice's belongings. Photo after photo documented every moment from their first meeting to falling in love. A thick diary filled with her love for him and her dreams for their future life. And then, a crumpled lab report. Bone marrow donation consent form. Donor, Alice. Recipient, Blair, Colin's mother. Boom. Colin's mind went completely blank. He had always believed it was Ida who donated bone marrow to his mother all those years ago. Ida had once used this achievement to demand $1 million from him, claiming it was for her nutritional expenses. Because of this, he harbored guilt toward her and granted her every request. But now, the consent form bore Alice's signature. His hands trembling, he dialed the number of his mother's attending physician. "Doctor, I have a question. 3 years ago, who exactly donated bone marrow to my mother?" There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. "Colin, the person who donated bone marrow to your mother back then was your wife, Miss Alice. She was extremely frail at the time, and the donation took a heavy toll on her health. We had advised against it. But she insisted on saving your mother and specifically asked us not to tell you." The rest of the words, Colin could no longer hear. His world spun wildly. So he was this utterly wrong. He mistook an impostor for his benefactor, cherishing her like a precious treasure. Yet he wounded his true benefactor, the woman who gave everything for him, beyond repair. Ah! He screamed in agony, slapping himself hard across the face. Colin, you're a bastard. You're blind. Shin Group, President's Office. Alice was handling an urgent document. Pregnancy hadn't slowed her down, instead, it had fueled her work ethic. She was determined to build a more solid foundation for her unborn children. Knock knock knock. The office door rattled. The secretary walked in. Alice, downstairs. Colin's here again. This marked the 7th consecutive day Colin had staked out the company entrance waiting for her. Alice's brow furrowed slightly. Tell him to get lost. But, he said if he doesn't see you today, he'll jump off the building. The secretary's tone carried a hint of reluctance. Below the company building, a crowd of media and onlookers had already gathered. Alice let out a cold laugh. Let him jump if he wants to. Make sure legal is ready to sue him for disturbing the peace and insurance fraud. Trying to threaten her with death? Colin seriously underestimated her. Yes, ma'am. The secretary withdrew. Downstairs. Colin stood by the fountain in the company building, soaked to the bone and gaunt. His eyes were bloodshot and red, making him look like a madman. He dialed Alice's number over and over, but the only response was the cold, relentless busy tone. People around him pointed and whispered. Isn't that the CEO of Lou Group? How did he end up like this? You haven't heard? He dumped Alice for some mistress. Now he's begging her back. Serves him right. A scumbag like that deserves to be left penniless. The taunts and whispers pierced Colin's ears like needles. He didn't care. All he wanted now was to see Alice and say I'm sorry to her face. He wanted to tell her he knew he was wrong. He wanted to tell her he knew it was her who donated the bone marrow. He wanted to beg her for another chance. Alice, he shouted at the top of his lungs toward the building. Come out and see me. I know I was wrong. Please, give me another chance. Just then, a black Rolls-Royce pulled up slowly at the company entrance. The door opened, and Beck stepped out. Dressed in a perfectly tailored bespoke suit, he stood tall and straight, radiating an air of refined elegance that stood in stark contrast to Colin's disheveled appearance. Colin, you're like a ghost that just won't go away. Beck stepped in front of him, his tone dripping with contempt. Beck. Colin saw him as if he were an enemy and lunged forward. Give Alice back to me. 2 bodyguards immediately stepped forward and restrained him. Give it back? Beck smoothed out the cuff he'd wrinkled and sneered. Colin, do you even deserve it? A freeloader who climbed the ladder by riding on women, a blind fool who mistook his own benefactor, a fool who gave away his own flesh and blood. What right do you have to bring her back to you? Every word from Beck felt like a knife plunging deep into Colin's heart. Colin opened his mouth, but no words came out. Yeah. What right did he have? I'm telling you, Alice's baby is mine. That was his last desperate plea. So what if it is? A cold, clear voice came from behind him. Colin froze, whirling around. Alice stood not far behind him, dressed in a sharp business suit. Her belly was slightly rounded, yet her presence radiated a power infinitely greater than before. She looked at him, her eyes holding neither love nor hate, only utter indifference. Colin, even if the child is yours, so what? Do you even deserve to be a father? Where were you when I needed you most? Where were you when I donated bone marrow to your mother and was at my weakest? Which woman were you with then? Now that your company is going bankrupt and everyone has abandoned you, you suddenly remember me? Remember the child? Colin, you're not stupid, you're just evil. Alice's words were calm, yet ruthless. They ripped away his last shred of dignity. No, it's not like that. Colin shook his head, tears streaming down his face. Alice, I was wrong. I truly understand now. It's too late, Alice cut him off. From the moment you told me to get out of that house, everything was already too late. With that, she turned away without another glance at him and walked toward Beck. Beck instinctively took off his suit jacket and draped it over her. "It's windy out there. Don't catch a chill." He pulled her into his arms, his movements gentle and filled with tenderness. "Let's go home." Alice nestled against him, basking in the warmth and security he offered. The two embraced, climbed into the car, and sped away. Colin was left kneeling alone, like a dog abandoned by the entire world. "No," he cried out in despair. He knew he had lost her completely. And with her, he had lost his 2 children he had never met. Colin's downfall came faster than anyone could have imagined. The Liu Group officially declared bankruptcy. The bank seized all assets under his name, including the villa he once took such pride in. Overnight, he plummeted from the clouds into the mud. What made him feel utterly hopeless was that his mother, Blair, had suddenly taken a turn for the worse and urgently needed a second bone marrow transplant. This time, however, no one was willing to donate for her. Colin knelt in the hospital corridor, begging every relative and friend he knew, only to be met with cold stares and scorn. He finally understood what it meant to be utterly abandoned by everyone. His thoughts turned to Alice. In this world, she might be the only one who could save his mother. But did he even have the nerve to ask her? At this very moment, Alice was holding a grand engagement ceremony with Beck. The ceremony took place on a private island, with only their closest family and friends in attendance. Alice wore a red cocktail dress, her belly already visibly rounded, yet it did nothing to diminish her beauty. Her face was radiant with a blissful smile, one Colin had never seen before, a smile that came from the very depths of her heart. Alice. Beck's mother, a woman of regal elegance, took her hand and slipped an exquisitely crafted emerald bracelet onto her wrist. "From now on, you're part of our family. If Beck ever dares to mistreat you, just tell your mother, I'll take care of him." "Thanks, Mom," Alice said sweetly. She could feel Beck's family's genuine acceptance and affection for her. This warmth was something she had never experienced at Colin's house. After the engagement ceremony, Beck took Alice for a walk along the beach. Their silhouettes stretched long beneath the setting sun. "What are you thinking about?" Beck pulled her close, resting his chin on the top of her head. "I wonder, what have I ever done to deserve you being so good to me?" Alice murmured softly, leaning against his chest. She knew a man like Beck could have any woman he wanted. Yet he had chosen her, a divorced woman carrying another man's child. "Silly girl." Beck chuckled softly, pulling her closer. "You should be asking how I ever deserved to wait for you. Alice, you have no idea how long I've waited for this day. From the moment he first saw her photograph in his grandfather's study as a young boy, that girl with the radiant smile had taken root in his heart. Yet before he could find her, she had already married another man. For 3 years, he could only watch her silently, seeing her sacrifice everything in compromise for another man. His heart ached with jealousy, yet he was powerless. Until she divorced. He knew his chance had come. "Beck." Alice lifted her gaze, meeting his deep, piercing eyes filled with an undying devotion. Her heart surrendered completely. Tiptoeing, she leaned in and kissed his lips. Just as the two were lost in their tender embrace, an unwelcome intruder shattered the moment. Colin. Somehow, he'd managed to sneak onto the island. He charged toward them, eyes bloodshot, like a desperate beast. "Alice." He dropped to his knees before her with a thud. "I beg you, save my mother. She's dying. Only you can save her." Alice stared at him, her eyes cold. "Colin, what makes you think I'd save her?" Because she's your mother-in-law." "Mother-in-law?" Alice snorted as if she'd heard the biggest joke ever. "Colin, we're divorced. And haven't you forgotten how she treated me?" She'd never forget. That woman had tormented her relentlessly because she couldn't bear children, calling her a barren hen. Even after Ida returned, they helped drive her out of the house. Now that she's sick and dying, they suddenly remember this hen that doesn't lay eggs? "Alice, I know I was wrong." Colin clung to her legs, pleading desperately. For my mother's sake, she's dying. Please save her one more time. I'll be your slave. I'll be your dog. Beck's expression had darkened to the extreme. He kicked Colin aside and shielded Alice behind him. Get out. His voice sounded like Satan himself from hell. Don't you dare lay your filthy hands on my wife. Beck. Colin scrambled to his feet, pointing at him like a madman. Don't get cocky. Alice is carrying my child. Mine. Smack. A resounding slap landed hard across Colin's face. The one who struck him was Alice. Colin, have you had enough? She stared at him, her eyes filled with deep disgust. Today, I'll make sure you die with clarity. She pulled 2 documents from her bag and slammed them onto his face. Take a good look at them yourself. One was a prenatal checkup form. The other was a paternity test report. Colin picked up the report with trembling hands. When he saw the conclusion section, it clearly stated: excluded paternity with Mr. Colin, similarity 0%, confirmed paternity with Mr. Beck, similarity 99.99%. Boom. Colin's mind exploded. He collapsed to the ground, drained of all strength. No, this can't be. Why not? Alice watched his dazed expression, her red lips curling into a cold smile. Colin, do you really think the person who was with you that night was me? You think too highly of yourself. That night, Colin had indeed gotten drunk and had indeed walked into the wrong room. But the room he had mistakenly entered wasn't hers. It was the presidential suite Beck had prepared for her. That day was her birthday. Beck had arranged to meet her, hoping to surprise her and come clean at the same time. Instead of Beck, she ended up waiting for a completely drunk Colin. As for Alice, she never went to the hotel that night. She was called back home by a phone call from Colin's mother and spent the entire night tending to that old hag. So. Alice stared at Colin's ashen face, her words coming out one by one, mercilessly laying bare the truth. That night, the one who shared your bed wasn't me at all. As for that so-called daughter in Ida's belly, whose bastard child it is, you should know better than I, but the child in my womb has always had only one father. She turned, gazing deeply at Beck. That father is Beck. The truth was laid bare. Colin was utterly dumbfounded. The child he'd always believed was his wasn't. The betrayal he'd assumed was a complete misunderstanding. What he'd pushed away with his own hands wasn't just the status of being the son-in-law of a billionaire dynasty, it was a woman who had loved him deeply from the very beginning. He ruined his entire life for a lie. No. No. He clutched his head, screaming in agony like a true madman. It turned out he was the one who was the biggest joke of all. Throw him out. Beck didn't bother to glance at him again as he ordered the bodyguard. No. Colin struggled. Alice. I was wrong. Forgive me. I'll do anything you ask. Alice paid him no further attention. Linking arms with Beck, she turned and walked away. She felt nothing for this man anymore. Love or hate, it had all vanished with that divorce agreement. Colin was cast out from the island. His mother ultimately died in the hospital after failing to find a suitable bone marrow donor. As for him, burdened by crushing debt and hounded by creditors, he had his leg broken and became a cripple. He survived day by day scavenging through trash bins, living a life worse than that of a pig or a dog. Occasionally, he would catch glimpses of Alice's updates on the giant street screens. She had given birth to twins, a boy and a girl, and was being pampered like a princess by Beck. She took the helm of the Shin Group, becoming the new queen of the business world with her ruthless decisiveness. Every time he saw her, his heart felt like it was being sliced open. He would remember the girl who once had only him in her heart and eyes. If only he had trusted her more back then. Would he be the one standing beside her now, basking in all that glory and happiness? Alas, there are no ifs.